All right, welcome to another deep dive. This time we're headed back to the Miami of the 1970s. Think disco balls, bell bottoms, and, well, the rise of something a little stronger than disco fever cocaine.
A different kind of high? Yeah.
Exactly. We've got three fascinating YouTube interviews with Jorge Valdes, a man who went from, model student to a key player in the Medellín Cartel.
Wow.
Yeah, so through his story, we're going to try to understand how this whole cocaine trade, how it blew up from small-time smuggling to a multi-million-dollar industry.
It's pretty crazy because, when you think about the cocaine trade, violence and chaos come to mind. But like Jorge's story, it shows a different side to the early days. It was much more, well, almost business-like, at least at first.
We're so right, and that's what makes his story so interesting, right? He gets to Miami as a 10-year-old Cuban immigrant. His family, they were wealthy back in Cuba, and his parents, they really drilled a strong work ethic into him.
Must have made a difference.
Totally. He finds success early on. Youngest employee at a bank at 17, honor student, gets a scholarship to the University of Miami. Like, the American dream, right?
Absolutely.
But then, this accounting job he takes at a grocery store, it just changes everything. Turns out, the grocery store was a front for Colombian drug dealers.
It's like something out of a movie.
Totally. And the way Jorge tells it, it's almost like he stumbled into this whole thing by accident. He's just doing his accounting, counting cash, when his clients just casually mentioned, oh yeah, by the way, we're drug dealers. Can you help us out with some foreign bank accounts?
Just like that.
Yeah, just super casual about it. It's wild to think about, right?
Yeah, totally different era. I mean, the cocaine trade, it was still in its early stages, These guys, they weren't like the stereotypical flashy gangsters we picture today. Jorge describes them as businessmen, suits, feasibility studies, logistics. It almost sounds legitimate, if you can believe that.
In a twisted way, yeah. And that's what's so interesting about Jorge's early experience. It really flips our ideas of what the drug trade was like, you know? Like, these weren't just some thugs on street corners. They were legit businessmen. Some had construction companies, coal mines, even emerald mines.
They knew how to blend in.
Exactly. Appearing legit, staying under the radar. And Jorge, well, he fit right in, clean-cut image, great with numbers. It makes you wonder, how did someone so smart not see what was really going on?
Well, I think there was maybe some naivete at play. Or maybe he just didn't want to see it, He tells this story about a refrigeration worker in California. This guy, he was convinced their boat was being used for smuggling cocaine.
Yeah.
And confronted Jorge about it.
Yeah.
And Jorge, he was genuinely surprised, like he couldn't believe it.
Wow, so their cover was that good? Even the people working with them didn't suspect a thing.
Seems like it. But this encounter with Manny, the boss of the grocery store, it really was a turning point for Jorge.
Manny, the mastermind, right.
Right. And he was interesting, not the typical ruthless kingpin we think of. Manny was shrewd, a businessman. Saw potential in Jorge. He saw the honesty, the work ethic, and most importantly, those accounting skills. So he brings Jorge into a new venture, a banana import company.
The perfect cover.
Exactly. And this is where things start to get serious. We're not talking small-time deals anymore. They were hiding cocaine in hollowed-out diesel engines, transporting them in U-Haul trucks across state lines.
Talk about thinking outside the box.
Right. It really shows how the cartel was evolving, getting more sophisticated, figuring out ways to move huge amounts of cocaine right under the noses of the authorities.
And Jorge was right at the center of it.
Oh, absolutely. Managing the money, the logistics, the bribes. It was a huge operation, incredibly complex, with high stakes and even higher rewards.
And don't forget the risks. I mean, this is the 70s, the Wild West of cocaine smuggling. There was no blueprint, no playbook. They were making it up as they went along.
Absolutely. And that's where Jorge's meticulous planning, his attention to detail, it really becomes clear. Every step had to be carefully calculated, the size of the shipments, the payoffs to corrupt officials. He was the one who turned a relatively small operation into a well-oiled smuggling machine.
And he wasn't content with just Miami, right? He saw the potential in California, a whole new market just waiting to be tapped.
Right, and here's the crazy thing. There wasn't even a set price for cocaine in California at the time.
So what did he do?
He set the price himself.
Just like that. Talk about bold.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
He saw a gap in the market and seized the opportunity. He basically created a gold rush, and he was leading the charge. They were buying cocaine for $28,000 a kilo, including transport, and selling it in California for $70,000.
That's a $42,000 profit per kilo.
Exactly. And they were moving 600 kilos a month.
The profits were insane. No wonder the cartel was growing so fast.
Right. And it's at this point that Jorge starts to see the dark side of this whole thing, the impact it's having on society. Addiction rates skyrocketing, crime, violence.
Yeah, you can't ignore that. And for Jorge, the turning point came when he witnessed a judge, someone who sentenced people for drug offenses, completely strung out on cocaine at a party.
Wow. That must have been a wake-up call.
It was. It shattered his illusions about the harmlessness of the trade. Here was someone supposed to uphold the law, succumbing to the very thing he was fighting against. Jorge was forced to confront the real-world consequences of his actions, the damage that cocaine was inflicting on people, on society.
It's a stark reminder that the allure of wealth and power comes at a huge price.
It really is. And this realization for Jorge, it marked a change in his thinking, an awareness of the moral complexities of the world he was now a part of. And at the same time,
He gets a promotion.
a big one.
Manny and his partners, they were impressed with Jorge's honesty and his business smarts, so they offered him control of all their U.S. operations.
It's crazy, right? This guy goes from a small-time accountant to running a multi-million-dollar cocaine smuggling operation.
It's a pivotal moment in his story. He's at the top, living the high life, but he's also facing a moral crisis.
It's a fascinating and complex journey, and we'll pick it up in the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the life of Jorge Valdes.
Last time we left off with him kind of wrestling with this moral dilemma, But at the same time, he's becoming super successful at the top of the Medellín Cartel's U.S. operations.
A real contradiction, yeah. I mean, here he is dealing with the fallout from the cocaine trade, the damage it's causing, but he's also climbing higher and higher within the system.
And you have to remember, the lifestyle he was living at this point was insane. Mansions, luxury cars, a private jet. He had it all.
The whole 9 yards, huh?
Totally.
Oh.
But even in this crazy world, cracks were starting to show.
The allure of wealth and power, it couldn't drown out everything. Jorge talks about this moment of clarity he had, he realized that the life he was building, it was actually empty.
And that's when things take a really wild turn, right? He just decides to walk away from it all.
He did. He gave up everything, all his assets to the government, everything he'd worked for. Imagine that for a second. It's crazy. It's unheard of in the world of drug lords to just give up millions of dollars and a life of total luxury. That takes some serious conviction.
It really does. It goes against everything we think we know about these guys. What do you think pushed him to that point?
Well, I think it was a few things. He was facing a ton of legal pressure. The feds were closing in. He knew a long prison sentence was coming. But it wasn't just about avoiding punishment. He was genuinely sorry for what he'd done, the harm he caused, the lives ruined because of the drug trade. His mother, she was really disappointed in him, and that weighed on him. He saw how scared his family was, the pain he was causing.
Yeah, you can really see that conflict in the interviews. He was a good dad. He wanted to protect his son, but his son needed bodyguards to go to school because of the world Jorge was involved in.
It's really sad. It just shows you how this kind of life, it doesn't just affect the person involved, It ripples outward. It affects families, communities, all society.
And it's interesting because even while he's facing these really serious charges, 3 life sentences, Jorge still had this weird sense of, respect for the law. He saw it as a game, a challenge he had to face, a consequence he was willing to accept.
He's a complex guy for sure. It's not like he was some hardened criminal who enjoyed violence. He saw the legal system as a worthy opponent, and maybe even thought getting caught was some form of, justice being served.
He even joked about congratulating the undercover agent who busted him, but the second time in prison, it was different from his first experience.
Yeah, his first time, he had a mistress, some privileges, consequences didn't seem so bad. But this time, he was facing real time, and the world outside had changed a lot. The cocaine trade, it had gotten even bigger, even more violent and ruthless.
And while he's locked up, he gets betrayed, right?
Yeah.
By the guy he left in charge, Sal Magluta.
Right. Jorge had made this deal with Sal and Willie Falcon. They would run his business while he was in prison, and he'd get cut of the profits when he got out. But when Jorge reached out to Sal from prison,
Nothing.
right, Sal basically said he was broke, that the business was gone. He abandoned Jorge, leaving him with nothing but a really long prison sentence.
That's rough. Talk about a lesson in loyalty or lack thereof.
Pretty cutthroat.
But in a way,
Maybe it was a good thing.
it's possible. Because by being cut off from Sal, Jorge had to actually face the consequences of his actions, and it forced him to start building a new life for himself. He went back to school, got a PhD in theological studies, even became a college professor.
Wow, that's quite a change. From cocaine kingpin to doctor of theology. Who would have thought? It makes you think, though.
Was it real? Was this like a genuine change, a desire to make up for his past? Or was it a way to distance himself from that life, reinvent himself? That's a good question. It's still up for debate. But during this time in prison, it's obvious something shifted for him. He got into his faith, buried himself in academics, and seemed really determined to change.
And this is where you see the difference between Jorge and someone like Pablo Escobar really clearly. Jorge was looking for redemption. Escobar was spiraling deeper and deeper into violence.
Jorge says Escobar was all about ego and pride, willing to kill anyone who got in his way. It's a scary look at how ruthless the cocaine trade had become.
They represent two completely different paths, two different reactions to power and money. Jorge, even though he was a criminal, he still seemed to have some moral compass, some limits. Escobar, it seemed like he had no boundaries, just pure greed and a lust for power.
It's a fascinating comparison, right? It shows you how the drug trade wasn't just one thing. It was this complex world with all kinds of people, all with different levels of ambition, greed, and even, in a weird way, morality.
And as we move into the next part of Jorge's story, we'll see how these different forces continue to play out.
Welcome back to the deep dive. It's crazy we're already at the final part of Jorge Valdez's story. I mean, we've seen this guy go from a regular accountant to a big-time cocaine kingpin, and then, just like that, he walks away from it all. But can someone really just escape their past like that?
It's the big question, isn't it? It's like, who was he really? The guy was before, or the person he says he is now? He did his time, found religion, even got a PhD. You'd think that would be enough for a fresh start, right?
Yeah, but he still talks about the guilt he feels, the pain he caused his family, his mother especially. It's like that past just won't let go.
He knows he messed up, that's for sure. And it's not just the prison time, it's everything that came with it. His family, all the lives messed up, and the drugs, the broken trust. It's kind of strange, though. He wrote this guide for wannabe drug lords, called it the Narco Master Journal.
Yeah, that seems kind of off, right? For a guy trying to redeem himself, why would he do that?
He says it's supposed to be like a warning, like by showing the ugly side of the drug trade, all the strategies and the thinking, he can stop other people from making the same mistakes he did. He wants to use what he knows for good, try to undo some of the bad stuff he did.
It's an interesting idea, almost like a vaccine for the drug trade, right? But
yeah.
Can you really separate knowledge from action? Like, can you tell people how to do something without encouraging them to actually do it?
That's the debate, right? Some people think he's being sincere, that he's trying to make amends. Others say he's just trying to cash in on his past. It makes you think about what redemption really means, and if knowledge can be used for good or bad.
Definitely makes you think. What about his relationship with Sal Magluta and Willie Falcon, the guys he left in charge?
There's definitely some bad blood there, some feeling of betrayal. Jorge feels like they abandoned him, especially when Sal said he had no money to share. But at the same time, Jorge realizes their success was because of him, because of what he started.
It's like he unleashed something he couldn't control. They thrived in that violent world, the world he came to hate.
Exactly. It's about the consequences of our actions, how they can ripple out and affect things in ways we never intended. Even when we try to fix things, the past can still have a huge impact on the future.
And speaking of the past, we can't forget about Pablo Escobar. He's like this dark cloud hanging over the whole story.
Escobar represents everything bad about the cocaine trade. The ruthlessness, the brutality, the things Jorge ended up rejecting. He said Escobar was all about ego and power, someone who would have whole families murdered just to stay on top.
It's terrifying, It's a reminder of how many lives were lost, all the violence that came with the drug trade. Jorge, even though he was involved, he seemed to have some limits, some things he wouldn't do. Escobar, it was like he had no limits at all.
They're like two sides of the same coin. Jorge's story, even with all the bad stuff, it gives you some hope that people can change, even if they were deep in the criminal world.
But it also makes you ask some tough questions. What will people remember Jorge Valdes for? The cocaine kingpin who built an empire? Or the guy who found forgiveness and tried to warn others about the dangers of that life?
It's complicated, right? It makes you look beyond simple labels of good and bad. It's about the different sides of human nature, the possibility of change, and the long-lasting effects of the choices we make.
It's been a wild ride exploring the life of Jorge Valdes. It's a cautionary tale for sure, but it's also about resilience, transformation, and trying to find meaning even when things are really dark. It reminds us that even in the worst situations, hope can still exist, and that while you can't escape your past, it doesn't have to control who you are.
It's really interesting how Jorge's story forces us to think about redemption and second chances, Can people really change? And how do we make up for the mistakes we've made?
Those are questions we all struggle with in some way. And while Jorge's story is unique, the ideas of redemption, taking responsibility, and facing the consequences of our actions, those are things we can all relate to. I hope this deep dive has given you something to think about. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring.